Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to another Sewell Leader Live. It's hard to believe it's been 5 weeks. We started March 19th, which we thought would be just a 1-week event to try to supplement our leadership event that would have been in its 14th year. And so I guess out of determination, we decided that we would just do this a few more weeks. Honored to have you join us today. We have had some great communicators and some great leaders from across our country speak to us. Today, we have Dr. Tim Elmore. Tim and I have been friends. We were talking just earlier that we've been friends since 2007. And Tim originally started as part of John Maxwell's world and was able to sit under his feet. And over time, felt that God had really called him to really help the next generation, meaning the men and women that were below us, the students, the young up and coming generations, not just of our country, but of our world. And Tim started an organization called Growing Leaders. You can check him out more at growingleaders.com. And because of my heart, not only for young people, but also to be able to be the recipient when I was younger of having somebody pour into my life. I really have a passion not only for what Tim does, but the heart behind it. Over the last few weeks, we've talked about that leaders really have the responsibility to do 3 things. Number 1, they have a responsibility to define reality. What's the situation that we really face ourselves in today? And for those of us in West Texas, in the Permian Basin, we were unfortunately and fortunately part of a history-making event just this week. When we saw oil and gas prices go to record lows. For each of us, that has its own really tragic impact. But at the same time, it provides us an amazing opportunity to lead well and to lead incredibly strong so that we can come out on the other side of this much better, which is really the second point of a leader's responsibility. So the first one is to define reality. The second one is to offer hope. And the third is to take massive, decisive action. So part of our role in our community, part of the Sewell Family Company's mission is to make this world truly a better place. And we do that when we partner with people like Dr. Tim Elmore. So Tim, on behalf of the Permian Basin and on behalf of my family and this entire world, thank you for taking time to teach us this morning. We know that we need to learn, we know that we need to grow, and we know that we need to lead the next generation of men and women in our country. So thanks for taking time to be with us today.
Collin, it's my honor. I've enjoyed my friendship with you, and it's great to be able to talk to the people listening in.
Well, Tim, you and I were talking, and I just want to ask you some questions, if that's okay, and then our viewers and our audience may send me some questions as well. But you've been doing and having a conversation with people that you've kind of titled Adjusting the Sails. And the subtitle of that has been that you are trying to figure out how we can lead the most anxious generation in maybe the most anxious time of their lives. So can you tell us a little bit about that and help us understand a little bit more about what it looks like to adjust the sails?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a metaphor, Collin, that I really drew from my last trip to Cairo, Egypt. We're working with schools in Egypt, great folks over there. But on the last day we were there, we got into a felucca, a small sailboat, and sailed down the Nile River for about an hour and a half. And the reason I'm using this metaphor is because I remember sitting down. There were about 8 of us on the boat, but the sailor, it was a single sailor, barefooted, who was a picture of constant activity because it was a windy day. His goal was to get our boat down that river to a certain destination. And I mean, the wind was contrary. So he was just pulling on ropes and pushing sails and holding on to poles. And he was sweating after 90 minutes. We all tipped him very well after we were done with our boat. But I remember thinking to myself, when I began to compare what he just did to what we need to do as leaders, not once did that sailor give up. In other words, just sit down and say, well, the winds are just contrary, just forget the whole thing. And yet I see people with culture today, particularly in this season we're in, just kind of say, well, whatever, forget, and they just kind of stop trying. Nor did that sailor shake his fist at the wind and start screaming and yelling that it wasn't cooperating. But I see people getting mad at culture and society and the economy, and should we stay inside? Should we not stay inside? You know, the whole thing. What he did do, and this is an obvious thing, but what he did do was he adjusted the sails. So we have three options. We can yell and scream and get mad. We can surrender, or we can adjust the sails. And as you and I both know, our mutual mentor, John Maxwell, taught us, pessimists complain about the wind. Optimists assume it's all going to change. Leaders adjust the sails. So it's all about how do we adjust to make sure the boat still gets to where we need to go, even though the winds are contrary.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, we definitely have a different wind today than we had just a few months ago, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Tim, you wrote a book that just came out last year, Gen Z. Would you talk to us a little about Generation Z? Who is that? Who is that specifically? And I think also you described that as a really anxious generation. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's all kinds of social scientists writing about the emerging generation, probably more than ever. Generation Z, in case you're just unaware of this demographic, would be the kids that really only have a memory of the 21st century. Collin, they're your kids. They grew up not just with cell phones, but with smartphones. They have to learn about September 11th, 2001 as a piece of history. You know, they learn in history class, like the fall of the Berlin Wall or JFK's assassination. So we called the book Generation Z Unfiltered because so much of what they do when they post on social media is filtered. You know, they have the little things they do to adjust it, make it look really funny or cool. We wanted to give a view that was very unfiltered of this generation. So I and my team found 9 challenges that Generation Z is facing that past generations of students didn't have to face, at least to the degree. And one of them is just the mental health issues. So they are the most anxious generation in American history. In fact, if I can share a real quick tidbit, Collin,
Yeah.
Dr. Robert Leahy, a cognitive behavioral therapist, said as the 21st century dawned, the average teenager in America experiences the same level of anxiety as a psychiatric patient did in the 1950s.
Wow.
So it just blows us away. Now, of course, some of us might look at them and go, what do they have to be anxious about? Life is awesome. They got a smartphone, an iPad. Yeah, that's true. And in some ways, they'll do goofy things on Snapchat or TikTok. But inside, there's a percolating, marinating anxiety about what the future is going to look like. Look at us today. We're all uncertain about the future, but they're growing up. They're wet clay. So we're just saying, how do we lead with both empathy and clear direction so these kids, when they become adults, are ready to be adults? That's our big goal.
Why do you think that is? What is it that has caused that kind of anxiety?
Yeah. So we ask the students this. We do some primary research and then we gather research. When we ask the top reasons for their anxiety, now this was before COVID-19 hit us.
Sure.
The top 3 reasons were, number 1, academic pressure to perform. So kids feel more than in my generation. I wanted to make good grades, but these kids feel this as early as elementary school. I just talked to some teachers yesterday that said his second graders were just worried about their grades. And I'm going, oh my gosh, when I was 8 years old, my biggest worry was, where's my baseball mitt and how do I find a girlfriend, you know? And now it's just so completely topsy-turvy. So the academic pressure is peer pressure and self-imposed, but it's really that I got to make a good grade because I want to get into this great college. The second big reason for their anxiety, Collin, is social media. So not just cyberbullying that we hear about, but just the amount of hours spent on social media. So according to Pew Research, the average adolescent spends the equivalent of a full-time job on a screen, and most of it's social media. I need to share some data though for listeners. This might be very, very helpful. I discovered recently, as I just dug through this, if a teenager spends less than 2 hours a day on social media, they're far less vulnerable to anxiety and depression. Anything north of 2 hours, they become extremely vulnerable. Even if it's not nasty stuff or negative stuff, just that much FOMO and FOBO and FOMO, you know, all these things going on creates anxiety. So parents, if you're listening, teachers, I would just say, hey, it's your call, kids, but I would say less than 2 hours if you want to fight that anxiety off. And then the third reason, believe it or not, is parental pressure. They were very, very open to us about how much they love their mom and dad, but they were saying they just feel like they've got pressure on them to make the grade, make the cut, make the team, make the. So I almost feel like the pendulum has swung. With the millennials, we joked 15 years ago about how parents were giving trophies to kids just for showing up on the soccer team.
Right.
It's like the pendulum has swung in many places where, now mom and dad are in the stands making sure they're going to get ready to play third base for the Boston Red Sox, and dad's chewing out the coach of the Little League team. And of course, I want to say to that coach or that dad, I'm sorry, hey, dad, your son's going to be a software programmer. He's probably not going to play for the Red Sox. But in any case, those are the three big reasons. And some of them we can do something about. It doesn't mean we soften up, but it does mean we need to know the sources of this is pretty scary. So anyway, I'll stop there. That's kind of the source of the anxiety.
So if I could, I'd love any advice you would give parents when you talked about that third one, that is this tension that we apply to our kids, that I feel confident my kids experience, and maybe there are other parents that are listening in. What advice would you give parents that you see or potential scenarios? You said, if kids spend 2 hours or less of screen time, so then what's the advice to the parents maybe?
Yeah. Well, my single word that I'm going to be probably using, Collin, for this time we have together is the word intentionality. I think so often moms and dads can just be so tired from a work day or all they have going on. They're stressed out too, that they're just not as intentional with their kids about really leading and developing them. And I have a big bias toward we've got to be intentional to develop. So the first thing I would say to mom and dad is just gain perspective. Making a C- in third grade is not the end of the world. In fact, to be honest with you, in ninth grade, it's not the end of the world. In fact, I don't think it's the end of the world forever. I do not know one employer that's asking about GPA on the job interview. You, Collin?
No, in fact, there's two things I'd say. My dad said, I called him when I was in college one time and I made 1D. And of all classes, you can appreciate this, it was in organizational management, which is basically what I do every day right now. Yes. And I called him. I wanted him to know that I made a D. And he said, hey, do you know what they call the kid who graduates last in his class? And I said, yeah, what's that? And he said, graduate.
Yeah.
You still get a diploma.
You're still in. Yeah.
So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So intentionality. In other words, being maybe, would another way to say that, or physically as an example, is to be specifically present when you're with your children. Yeah.
And we're going to obviously get more into that, I hope, in this hour. But Pam and I, my wife and I, just decided we would collaborate with our teachers. They were going to teach reading, writing, arithmetic, but we were going to come right alongside and say, let's build good future adults here. So I think in this particular season, let me tell you what I see happening to moms and dads. I've spoken to lots of them, even in our neighborhood. Yeah. Number one, I think many are gaining a new appreciation for that teacher because now they're sitting at home with Junior and going, wow. Secondly, I'm saying this tongue firmly planted in cheek, but I think the second thing is I think they're realizing that maybe that teacher wasn't the whole problem down at the school. They're marching down, chewing out their teacher. They're realizing now Junior maybe isn't the angel that I thought he was or she was. I had one mom, Collin, joke with me. She's going to rip that bumper sticker off her car.
I love that. I love it. So what would you say is the best thing we need to keep in mind, Tim, as we're leading our kids right now, that Gen Z? What do we need to keep in mind?
Okay, good. So I'm going to get really practical. We're at the house. We're kind of locked into this quarantine thing. 3 quick thoughts. They're all common sense, but sometimes common sense is uncommon. So the first thing I would say is check your motives as you lead your kids. And by that, I simply mean, is it worry or wisdom that you're communicating to them? Let me give you a classic illustration of this. Forget the coronavirus. Just at any given time, we might say to our young children, hey, don't play in traffic. You'll get hit by a car. Well, why do we have to throw in that you'll get hit by a car? That's a worry mode. That's a fear motivation.
Interesting.
Why wouldn't we do it, speak out of wisdom and say, hey, listen, look both ways. In fact, it's even wiser just to not play real, near the road at all. Kids can smell worry a mile away, and it builds a narrative of worry as they enter adulthood, and they've got it. because we have been so obsessive and so over-functioning in our words. So I would just say, check your own motives as you give direction to your kids. Is it worry or wisdom?
Wow.
Number two, I would say check your foundation. Is it fear or facts upon which you base your conclusions? Now, let me get really blunt with everybody. You and I both know watching the news all day long just is going to create fear.
Yep. That's screen time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So here's what I've done. You don't have to follow this, but here's what I've done. I watch 30 to 60 minutes of news a day, and I'm on to my work. I'm going to get something done that's productive, but I've got the facts. I've got enough of the headlines that I know what to do and when we're going to do this or that or the other in our state. So I just think we need to be really checking our foundation. Is it fear or facts? And then thirdly, I think we need to check our very advice that we're giving. Is it based on panic or principles? Collin, you and I are both people that believe in leading from principle. Right. If I'm only reacting to my current reality, I'm going to probably just react emotionally out of panic. And that's a negative. Kids are going to smell that and they're going to begin to pick it up. It's contagious. If we lead out of principles, really what we're saying is, what are the handful of timeless truths that I know I can go to the bank with? These are just real. And if I lead off of principles, especially in a crisis, kids are going to go, okay, dad's not different. Mom's not different. They're staying the course. You know, they're adjusting the sails, but the boat's still going in the same direction. That's what I think we need to do. So I would say those three are my big three. And then, you know what? Let me share one more thing. I am really big right now on us seizing the moment that we're in. For many, this is a big interruption. It's hard because we're having to teach online or, you know, whatever. But I'm saying, what could happen if we began to perceive this apparent disadvantage as an advantage? Let me illustrate. One of my favorite stories that I dug up as soon as the COVID-19 thing hit was, what did people do in past pandemics and epidemics? Did you know the London plague was part of the Black Plague in Europe centuries ago? In 1665, Isaac Newton was a college student at Cambridge University. And when the Great Plague of London broke out, they sent the kids home in their own version of social distancing. Right. While Isaac Newton was at home, you may know this, but this is fascinating. He actually continues his curious studies on his own, no teacher around. He actually invents calculus. He came up with calculus during the epidemic. Number two, he gets a prism and he starts looking through it and he comes up with his theories on optics, which we still use to this day. And then finally, it was while he was home during that epidemic that the proverbial apple fell from the tree that we've all read about. And he came up with his laws of motion and laws of gravity. 1 year later, he returns to school, theories in hand. Within a year, he's a fellow. Within 2 years, he's a professor. Wow. I say a pandemic is a terrible thing to waste, and he didn't waste it. So what could we as parents and teachers and employers do that we go, you know what? I got some extra time right now. Instead of vegging in front of Netflix, which is okay, what if I said, I'm going to do something I would never have time to do except for this? So that would be my challenge.
That's awesome. Tim, one of the questions we got from the viewers, let me read this to you. It says, what training would you recommend for parents and school district staff to adjust our sales?
Wow, that's great. So my first response.
Read your book, I know.
What's that? Yeah, read my book. That's exactly right. I'm a disciple of John Maxwell. Read my book. No, here's what I would say. I would say there's never been a time that's more important to teach social and emotional learning. Now, if you're in education, folks, you know that term has taken the educational world by storm. If you're not familiar with SEL, social emotional learning, it's really the teaching of emotional intelligence and social intelligence in a way that helps kids manage their emotions. Don't you think that's relevant right now? Right. Resolve conflict, get along with people, communicate well. The very things, Collin, you're looking for when you hire an employee, that's the stuff I think school ought to be doing. Now, I'm not against academics. I so believe in that. I believe in Horace Mann and his desire to form the modern day public school. But you do know that Horace Mann in 1859 said the whole goal is to get kids career ready and good citizens. Well, sometimes I think we pay so much attention just to GPA and SAT and ACT, we're not getting kids career ready. I talk to employers that go, I don't think they're ready. So let me get back to SEO. I'm so sorry, I ramble.
No, you're good.
Social emotional learning, there are curriculum. In fact, we have curriculum for this. It's taught with images that start conversations. It's the ability to teach people skills, self-awareness, self-management, relationship management. I just feel like now we can do it. And I think it can be done on a screen as long as we get them online so we can later get them offline to actually practice what we do. So let me give you one illustration of this. So we released a free resource. Let me talk about it if you don't mind. It's
Sure.
called Home Chats. We took 8 of our Habitude images. We teach a principle with an image because pictures are worth 1,000 words. So we have 8 of these that you can get for free. You can download them. But each of the home chats has an image and it shares the principle it stands for. There's activities, there's discussion, conversation. But one of them is on trains and tracks. And here's the whole truth behind trains and tracks. It's a great photograph of a locomotive engine. We say, wouldn't it be ridiculous for an engineer of a locomotive train to hop off at a train station and say, you know, I'm ticked off. I feel like these tracks are so confining. I'm going to take this thing up the hill and I'm going to see how far I can get. Well, he's not going to get very far. It's ridiculous because the track actually helps him get where he needs to go. That's really teaching the principle of we need systems. We need tracks to make sure the train goes forward. Well, kids are creatives and they often don't like tracks. This just seals what kind of tracks do we need to put in place in our home that help us get to our goals. Well, and by the way, everybody has to do it. Mom, dad, Susie, Tommy. So anyway, you get the point. But I just believe we got to go after social emotional learning, and this is our chance to really nail that down. Now, the activities really become great. For instance, one of them is on hosts and guests. We believe in relationships. We should always act like a host, not a guest, where we're initiating, not just reacting. The assignment there is host someone in your home. Your sibling that you can't stand, or at least you thought you couldn't stand until he was forced to be your BFF.
That's right.
We just believe now you can learn things to host. So anyway, I'll stop there, Collin. I've rambled, but I'm just an absolute believer. That's what we need to focus on, especially at this time.
Yeah, thank you. I want to ask you one follow-up question. When you were giving people those initial 3 pieces of advice, and then you added the 4th bonus.
Yeah.
But one of the third piece of advice is you said that you should really evaluate basically your life values or those principles that you hold dear. In other words, make sure that you're sure.
Yeah.
So the question is, could you give the audience an example, maybe Tim, of maybe it's one of your personal life values that you hold or one of your beliefs that you hold that you really are trying to hang on during this time?
Yeah. One of them, we actually had 7 family values, but one of them is faith. And we certainly mean that in a sense of we have faith in God, but it's also, we believe the best leadership and the best lives are lived off of belief and hope. Napoleon Bonaparte said leaders are dealers in hope. So we believe, especially in these times, our children and our colleagues need to see we absolutely believe. But Collin, you just triggered something with me. Let me share for listeners' sake. I get asked this question, what did you do with your kids? What were the conversations you had with your kids? There were 5 conversations I had with my kids that really, as an educator as well as a dad, really paid off. Here they are. Number 1, your EQ is more important than your IQ. Meaning that whole emotional intelligence piece is going to be way more valuable. Now, certainly you want to be as smart as you can be, but IQ doesn't change a lot in life. EQ can be developed. Number 2, maturity demands that you get over yourself. Maturity demands that you get over yourself. Have you ever thought about that? The ultimate picture of immaturity is a baby that is completely crying because he or she didn't get a bottle or diapers changed or whatever. As you mature, I am now others focused and I'm not narcissistic. Thank you very much. So maturity demands that we get over ourselves. Number 3, growth will always require a struggle. I remember just talking to my kids. In fact, Collin, you remember this. I was working on some curriculum for John Maxwell, and my kids saw me toiling in the basement over this. And I let them see me toil. I want them to know Dad still is working hard, and this is not easy and it's not fun. But I just believe growth always involves a struggle. 4, success will always take longer than you think. Right now, we're graduating kids with really a difficult time delaying gratification because look at the world we raise them in.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, just know you're in a crock pot, not a microwave. It's going to take longer than you think to really taste good in the end. And then number 5, the first person you must lead is yourself. So we, the very first Habitude book, Collin, you know this, is on self-leadership. It's the iceberg. It's the starving baker. It's thermostats and thermometers. So we just believe you've got to lead yourself. Don't even pretend to lead anybody else. If they look at your life and they're seeing you're not even leading yourself very well. So those would be conversations I think it would be good to have.
That is awesome. That is awesome advice. Thank you. I may get you to recap those at the end if we have time again, just to make sure that people got those, or maybe we can send them out to the audience. I took my notes, so make sure we send them out.
Yeah, I'll be happy.
Okay, so let me go back. When you think about this pandemic and you think about everything that's going on,
yeah.
So how is that going to impact Gen Z's anxiety level? If it's already high, if it's the most anxious generation we've seen, what do we expect next?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I've been thinking about this, and I feel like we have some positive opportunities and some negative possibilities. So let me give you them real quick. The potential negatives are the normalization of isolation. So in other words, Gen Z, who is already more isolated than the millennials, meaning they'll date somebody online on their portable device rather than in person. They're not going to the shopping mall as much anymore. They're just, hanging out with friends on a Google Hangout. Yeah. So the normalization of isolation. The reason I don't like that is because I believe, and this is data-based, that humans are social creatures. We need to be with each other more than just a screen. That's my belief. So we're going to need to make sure that they don't get used to the lazy man's way of just doing relationships on a screen. I don't think marriages are developed on a screen. Well, I don't think good working relationships are developed on a screen. So that's number 1. Number 2, the normalization of panic and anxiety. I just don't become my best self when I'm leading out of anxiety and panic. That's right. So there's that one. The third one is the normalization of a scarcity mindset. So I could see this going either way, listeners. Stephen Covey years ago started talking about the scarcity mindset and the abundance mindset. We go one of two ways. We either feel like life is running out or life is abundant and there's always going to be more. Now, I know there's a balance here, but I believe we've got to teach the abundance mindset, that there's going to be more, we can make more, we're going to do this. And I think right now, look at us, we're hoarding toilet paper. What is up with that? That's a scarcity mindset. I'm going to run out. So all I'm saying is, if we don't change or form the narrative that these kids have when they leave our homes, that could easily be the story that they tell themselves when it's all over. Now, I think there's some positive possibilities. The positive potential outcomes are the expansion of resourcefulness and innovation. So haven't we watched TV and saw people just get really resourceful during this period of time we're in? Why not teach? I think resourcefulness is the meta competency going into a career. I can be resourceful. I can reinvent myself. If my boss asks me to do something different this year, completely different than last year, if I'm resourceful, I can figure out a way to do that. That's the person I want.
Yeah, so you called it, tell me that phrase again, the meta resourcefulness?
The meta competency
okay.
for the 21st century, in my mind, is resourcefulness. So
what that reminds me of is your Habitudes gorillas in Hawaii.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Because, and I want our audience to know that we've been using your Habitudes to teach our team not only self-leadership, but team leadership principles for a decade now. So would you just digress for just a moment, and if you want to, this resourcefulness concept, take that and maybe even use gorillas in Hawaii if you need to, but help us understand, what does that resourcefulness look like? Because in my opinion, wouldn't you say that is whether or not we accept our lives or we lead our lives? And a lot of that is determined by how resourceful we'll make ourselves.
No doubt about it. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of what we're about to talk about the next couple of minutes. First of all, the gorillas in Hawaii image, which may sound totally random to you, listener. Let me just explain it real quick. So all these habitudes are based off of imagery and often based off of story, because we remember imagery and we remember story. Our brains think in pictures. So Gorillas in Hawaii is based off of my very first employee at Growing Leaders way back in 2003, 2004.
David,
He had just finished, I'm sorry.
It was David, correct?
Yeah, that's right. David Christie. He had just finished working at a production company out in Malibu. He went to Pepperdine University, and he was in class one day, and his boss called him. And so he steps out of class, and he says, "Yeah, what's up?" And he goes, "Well, we're going to shoot a commercial for Toyota trucks in Hawaii this next weekend. They want a gorilla, a silverback gorilla in the bed of that truck. We need you to get a gorilla in Hawaii by this weekend." Yeah. And then he hung up the phone. So David's looking at his phone for a moment going, did that just happen? Now, here's what I love about David. What he didn't say was, that wasn't in my job description when you first hired me, or I've never actually done that before, or Grills in Hawaii for Dummies has not been released yet, or any of these things. Now, I'm joking, but you know what I'm talking about. Make excuses rather than we make solutions. So David just got busy, and he didn't know what he was doing. He starts calling. He starts getting on websites. He calls friends of friends of friends. And he finally found the animal trainer at Michael Jackson's former Neverland, where they had animals. And he found out how to get a gorilla in Hawaii. And he was able to do it before Friday. What I love about this, though, was David was like this all his time working for me. He just found ways. We were pioneering stuff all the time. In fact, we have another habitude called pioneers and settlers. Which one are you? Settlers wait for the pioneers to do all the front work, and then they settle in when it's safe. Pioneers are going, man, let's make this up. Let's figure it out. So anyway, I'll stop there by saying we've got to develop a resourceful attitude that says, even though I've never done this before, I would embrace the opportunity to say, I get to do something new. I get to go into brand new territory. And in doing this, I may pave the way for others behind me.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's really helpful because I think right now that there's so many of us that if we're not careful, we could easily feel like a victim.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to say, we have an opportunity. Now, what are we going to do with this?
You're exactly.
And to me, I think maybe all of us in our communities have seen the real entrepreneurs have come forward.
Yeah.
And I think one of the greatest, maybe, Tim, examples is all of our local restaurants who are not maybe prepared for takeout or curbside delivery. And because they have this entrepreneurial spirit, they just said, we will find a way to make this work.
Yeah.
And so they really have expressed, how do I become resourceful in that?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So as you've talked to educators and you've talked to parents, what are you learning and what do we need to know about life that is now almost exclusively a virtual experience? And then the impacts of social isolation, not just on Gen Z, but on us who are around Gen Z. And tell us what we need to know and tell us what we can learn.
Yeah. Well, when we began to call the teachers and schools that we partner with, the number one thing we heard from educators was, how do I lead these anxious students when I'm anxious myself? Yeah. So we realized we got to lean in and really display, hopefully, authentic empathy and say, I know this is hard. This is really a new normal for sure. Not unlike completely the new normal after September 11, 2001. It was just a new day. Only this one snuck up on us and came slowly. So I believe that what we're going to need to do is do, Collin, what you just talked about, really introduce a brand new paradigm or narrative to kids from their normal reaction of, I'm a victim of this, I hate this, I'm bored, I'm done with school in 35 minutes, what do I do with the rest of my day? Which is happening all across the country. Couple of thoughts real quick. One is, I love the parents that are saying to their kids, all right, let's go watch the news, pick one news story that's taken place that's bad news, and we hear lots of that, and say, if you were in charge of that, what would you do? Now, if they're in elementary school, they're probably going to come up with a really horrible, not so logical answer. But as they begin to get older, they're going to come up with some pretty sharp answers. My kids got to the point, we did this all the time. My kids got to the point where they came up with some very strategic ideas I would have never thought of. So I'll give you a good example. Liam is a college student up in the New England area. Just heard about him. He got home from college and was kind of bored, but his mother said, you know, Carolyn down the street is needing some help. She's 85 years old and can't get out to get groceries. So Liam went down and took her some food, gave her a virtual hug, but he thought to himself as he left, I wonder how many other people like Carolyn there are. Well, he found out very rapidly there's a bunch of them. He recruited 1,200 other college students, and they're now 1,200, 1,200. Yeah. And so they're calling it invisible hands because they're not actually touching. In fact, they'll even wipe down the bag with a sterilizer. So when the 85-year-old gets it, it's all fine. Now, you know what? That's not the most brilliant idea in the world. That's a good idea. Yeah. So I'm thinking if we could teach this, we could seize the day and really capitalize on this, and would have never happened in a normal school day where we're there 8:30 to 3 and we're just lost in ourselves. So
you know, you talk about that with in your book. One time I read that the most introverted person in the world would impact 10,000 other people in their life.
Yeah.
It's what do you think gets learned? What does a young man like Liam learn, or what do the other 1,199 people learn, you think? What are the unintended lessons that they pick up from that?
I can already tell you, I'm just finishing an article on this right now. While I believe that anxiety can be a very horrible disorder that needs counseling and maybe even medication, I think for millions and millions and millions of Gen Z kids, the best remedy for their anxiety, and pardon me, please, I'm going to sound like your grandpa now, is to get your eyes off yourself and start focusing on someone else. I know what Liam learned. Liam learned, I'm not so anxious anymore. I'm completely engaged in the idea of how do I serve these other people? And I'm going to get choked up here, but I'm thinking these 80-somethings needed help way more than Liam needed help. And the moment he stopped thinking about himself, and I don't think he was self-preoccupied, but suddenly our anxiety drains from us because we are caught up in something bigger than ourselves. And that's what makes us grow up well. Every one of you listening, I think whatever your background would say, yeah, that's when I grew up. I got to be a part of something bigger than me, and I actually cared about it. So I think that would be one unintended benefit from that service. I'll just stop there. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So if you think about that, do you think that's part of the solution to that scarcity mindset? It's focusing on what one of our viewers said, you know, how do we stop teaching a scarcity mindset? So do you think that's part of it, is focusing on others?
I really do. And I know, listeners, you must be thinking, duh, I heard that in Sunday school way back when I was in the first grade. Yeah, but did we do it? I think far too often we grow older and we get a little more tired, a little more jaded, more cynical, and we really stop doing this. So this is not a big deal. My wife and I said, we got to practice this at our age. So my wife's now delivering groceries to our older neighbors, and we're giving to charities that we didn't even give to before. And we're seeking out what can we do at a distance to still serve others for our own sake. It's actually selfish, but we're finding that's what we need to do. So here's what, Collin, I never finished. Here's some other positive outcomes that could come from this whole pandemic. I mentioned resourcefulness and innovation. I think we may see the expansion of saving and giving in Gen Z. Mm-hmm. So if you remember, after September 11th, there was a wonderful blip. It was only a blip because life got really a lot better quickly. But we saw kids start to give blood, give money. They didn't have a lot, but they gave money. We all gave money and blood after September 11th. I think we could see Generation Z, who, by the way, is already better at saving than the millennials. So the millennials accrued the largest tuition debt in American history. You know that. Tuition debt in America is even larger than credit card debt right now, which just is scary. Well,
Wow.
Gen Z has learned from their older counterparts and said, I don't want to do that. So they've been good at saving. I think we're going to see an expansion of giving if we lead them well. And then lastly, I think we're going to see the expansion of responsive service workers. Do you remember after September 11th, there was a whole lot of college students, especially, that went to ground zero and said, I want to serve. I think we're looking at the TV, and I think Gen Z may say, I want to be a nurse. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a first responder. And maybe they're not all supposed to do that, but I love that heartbeat that when they see a crisis, just maybe they go, I want to answer that call and be a hero. So,
yeah, you know, Tim, I'll share this with you and with the audience. The one regret, well, the number one regret maybe that I have after 9/11 is I remember feeling called and compelled to drive to New York City and volunteer my time. And I did not do that.
wow.
And afterwards, I said, God, if there's ever an opportunity of a crisis that happens again,
Yeah.
I promise I'll do my part to help other people.
Yeah.
And the reason that we are doing these Leadership Live events today is because of that promise I made 19 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
To your point of maybe, just maybe, by our example, maybe Gen Z understands that life really is about other people and not ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely believe that. In fact, Collin, I'm hearing stories of students. There's one gal, a college student in Kentucky, that is especially interested in studying hearing impaired and deaf people. And she's designed masks for people that are deaf, but they need to read your lips. So there's a window in the mask. And I'm going, what a great idea. Med school students are actually going, before I even get my medical degree, I'm going to go down to that hospital and say, I can do childcare, I can do pet care, I can bring food in. This is the spirit that made our nation great.
That's right.
And I think that we've just got to say, okay, we've got to do this now, especially.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Tim, if I'm a teacher, if I'm an administrator, who many of our public education folks, our leaders, were caught completely flat-footed, not because they wanted to be unprepared, but because we all in the entire world were caught unprepared in many ways.
Yeah.
But if I'm a teacher right now, if I'm an administrator, what do I need to do? And maybe more importantly, what do I need to know in that role?
Wow. I want to be very careful because I know this is a large question. Let me start by just reiterating. I think we need to remember the anxiety that may be beneath the surface that I don't see on Snapchat, but it's very real. I just want to encourage you, if all of you are leaders, you know you've got to lead out of empathy. So one of our images that I think is a prime image for all leaders now is called the velvet covered brick. I think we need to be velvet covered bricks. Okay. So if you can picture, it's actually a photograph of a velvet covered brick. If you can picture it in your mind, velvet on the outside, so that's the soft part. We lead with empathy, we lead with belief, we lead with care and attention. We're listening. We let them know. We send signals. We've got your back. We believe in you. But inside, brick, which means because I believe in you, I'm not going to dilute the standard because it seems hard this week. Or I'm not going to let you be mediocre because I know you're capable of more. I think the best leaders in history have been velvet bricks. So I need to be responsive and demanding. Let me play that out. Responsive, I accept you, I believe in you. Demanding, and because I believe in you, I'm gonna keep the standard high. So Collin, let me share some research that will be very helpful, I think, to listeners. So a study was done of middle school kids. So these were 12, 13-year-old children. Okay. The children had just turned in an assignment, and by the way, this was a large study. This was thousands of kids. And the teachers were trying to find what kind of comments or remarks they could make in red ink when they give the paper back that would elicit effort. Let me try again. Well, they tried hundreds of responses, but the one response that teachers gave that the researchers said it was almost magical. It was so far and above superior to the other comments to try to elicit effort, was simply this. Here are the words. I'm giving you these comments because I have high expectations of you, and I know you can reach them.
That's good.
Again, I'm giving you these comments.
That's good.
Because I have high expectations of you, and I know you can reach them. What they found was it was 40% more effort than all the other responses. Minimally 40, not 4%, up to 320% for kids of color that might not have ever had a caring adult or a dad or whatever say that sort of thing. So notice the velvet brick. I believe in you. I know you can do this. But here's the standard. I need you to try again. This is good life. This is good leadership.
That's awesome. What about us as parents? What do you think we need to know now while we're leading our kids up? My wife's already tenured her resignation as a homeschool teacher, but for some reason we just haven't accepted it yet. So she's still a homeschool teacher. And you and I talked earlier, I think she wants to implement proactive corporal punishment. We're going to do it on the front side, anticipating the issue instead of the back. So what do we do for parents who it's not like we didn't have full-time jobs before and now we have 2 full-time jobs? What advice do you give?
Okay, a couple of thoughts that I have in mind. This first thought is not unlike something you shared at the very beginning of this live stream. I believe as we lead the next generation, parents for sure, but I would even all say coaches, youth pastors, teachers, one, they need context because they're young and they've never experienced anything like this. We're old and we've never experienced it. They're young and they're still trying to figure out, how do I navigate this? So context is important. Let me share with you, child. This is not the worst thing that's ever happened to us. The earth has gone through this before and we've made it through. I'm not trying to simplify or make it superficial, but I think they need context from us. Always put things in perspective. The next one is applications, meaning kids need especially clear points of application. Here's what we need to do. A, B, C. Clear instruction. I'm talking to Division I NCAA coaches a lot these days. Your student athletes on your screen need clear instruction. So context, clear applications. The last one is belief. Our kids, I know we've touched on this already, need to hear us communicate belief. Now, you might have noticed those 3 words spell the word CAB. Context, applications, belief. Whenever I'm talking to a student, and I'm talking a lot these days on the screen, I got to hop in a cab, to get where I want to go. So I would say those 3 would be huge. Now, Collin, if you don't mind, I don't want to hijack this. I just thought of 3 things. If I was a leader like a principal of a school or a leader that I've got young employees, here's what I've learned rapidly, and I can do this quickly, but I think it might be just helpful.
Okay.
3 thoughts. Number 1, as you're in meetings with these people virtually, always cover personal items before business items. Here's why. If you jump right into the business, which is natural, they're going to start wondering, does he care for me? Does he know what I'm struggling with? Does he know what I'm suffering through right now? And so if you make sure and even just do check-ins and talk about personal life, are you okay? Then we earn our right to talk about business and they're willing to go on our journey because we went on their journey. Number 2, hard conversations before easy ones. Have you ever noticed in times of crisis, you want to go, well, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. And people start thinking we're spin doctors because they know it's not fine right now, boss. Yep. So I would say always have the hard conversations first. Share the bad news. Share the stuff that's not going so. And then you get to end on the good stuff.
Right.
I noticed this the other night when Governor Cuomo in New York was sharing an update on how the hardest hit state was dealing with it. He did the hard stuff first. And then he went back and said, now there's some good news. And I thought he nailed it. And by the way, then he got personal talking about his brother, Chris, who had gotten, the coronavirus. So it was very interesting. So the third one is big picture before smaller details. Most people need to see the box top before they put that big jigsaw puzzle together. You follow me on that? That's one of our habitudes.
Yeah.
Give them the box top, then you can show them where their piece fits. But I need to see the big picture before I even know where I fit. So personal before business, hard conversations before easy ones, and big picture before smaller details, I think helps human beings follow well.
That's awesome. Can I ask you, I have just a couple more questions if you've got just a second. Okay. Talk to me about how parents and teachers need to support each other during this time. So if you think about what do parents need to do for teachers, and then also what do the teachers need to do for parents? Not from a lesson plan standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a connection standpoint.
What I would say first to that, Collin, would be something that you and I probably have heard or seen already. I just think we need to do more of it. Okay. I think the emotional and social support that you just recommended is exactly what we need to do, but it needs to be above the call of duty. So they expect us to write a nice email. Thanks, Mrs. Johnson. Good job. That's expected.
Yeah.
I think when I hear stories, pardon me, I'm going to get choked up again. When I hear stories of teachers driving through the neighborhoods of their kids, waving and holding up signs that they know they're going to do well on the test. I'm so sorry. I'm just thinking, nobody asked them to do that. Their principal didn't say, now y'all drive through the neighborhoods now. But I just think that, I just know in our neighborhood, one of our neighbors took a whole meal and set it on the step of one of the teachers. I'm sorry, she was a parent. So on the doorstep, one of the teachers that said, I just know you're doing double duty right now. Yep. That's over and above the call of duty. That second mile, that's the stuff that gets remembered and stands out, and the story gets around, and the narrative is good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we know that we're going to come out on the other side of this. Have you thought about the next, I don't know, 30, 60, 90, 100 days on the backside when I've heard a lot of people say that they can't wait for things to get back to normal. But I think my hope would be, there are a lot of things that I hope don't go back. So what would be a plan you think that people have to really consider, Tim?
Okay.
The next 100 days.
Yeah. I would say first to parents, leverage the table. Don't give up on the table. Mm-hmm. Now, some of you parents might be the typical scenario where your typical afternoon is get them after school, rush them in the minivan to practice, go get chicken nuggets in the van, eat them in the van while you get off to karate and piano. And it's just busy, busy, busy. And we don't even have dinner together at the table. So sorry, I'm going to sound like your grandpa again. I think one of the struggles we have had in our nation is we just aren't sitting around a table and just doing life, talking about and processing the day. So don't give up on the table. Yep. Board games, card games, food always goes over well. We need to do the table well. I think we need to keep moving. So right now we're stuck at home and we have to be more intentional. So let's say you're going over the spelling test with your child. Go out and shoot hoops while you're doing the spelling words, but keep moving. Our bodies need to move. We're going to beat anxiety if we keep moving because the endorphins are released and it just makes us, we just do better. Those are simple things. Okay. The next thing I would say though, Collin, and I know you must be doing this with your companies, is we need to do scenario planning, even at home, also at school, also at work. You know what scenario planning is, listeners. This is where you look into the future, maybe 100 days, maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year, and say, let's do worst case scenario. What could life look like? Moderate case scenario and best case scenario. And of course, we all wish for best case scenario, but we just did this with our team and it was so helpful. In fact, Collin, you'll be interested to know, I just spoke to Frank Blake, who used to be the CEO of Home Depot. He's now the chairman of the board at Delta Airlines. He told me, he said, Tim, in our scenario planning at Delta, every worst case scenario we did, it was worse. It was actually worse than our worst. So he said, we really got to do well. So I would say it would be good for families as well as leaders of schools and companies to say, let's really do our best to say, if in 6 months we're just not where we would want to be, how would we do this? And how would we manage our money and our energy and our time? That's just going to be huge. I'll stop there. I know we need to stop, but I would say scenario planning is a really smart thing to do from mom and dad to CEO.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. Listen, you've been amazing to give us some of your time. Thank you. Any final story you would want to tell these thousands of folks that are listening in and going to be able to hear this later, maybe that would allow them to be reminded that the sun will come up tomorrow, that there really is hope, or an encouragement that we need to know as we close out today?
Yeah. Wow. Well, it would just be that hold on to your belief that that will happen. But Collin, I'm going to toss this back to you if you don't mind. I'm putting you on the spot. When you and I were on the phone some weeks ago, you told me your son gave you the greatest compliment. I don't know if you shared this yet on one of your live streams, but if you haven't, it was so encouraging to me. It was just a simple conversation. Do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now. It kind of all runs together. And we were in the kitchen, and my 15-year-old son came into the kitchen. My wife and I were in there, and she left. And she said, and Harris, my 15-year-old, he said, "Dad, Mom's a little nervous about this virus and oil, isn't she?" And I said, "Yeah, she's a little nervous, but she's going to be okay." And he didn't know. But in the moment, he paid me the greatest compliment that I've had today. And he just looked at me and he said, "You're not scared, are you, Dad?"
Mm.
And I said, "No, son, I'm not scared." Now, Tim, the reason that I shared that story with you, and you're so kind to bring it up, is that what I know is that life lessons are caught.
Yeah.
They are not taught.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that I was teaching my belief to him at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't have a clue. I just was living my life based upon those values and principles that you said we all need to develop for ourselves.
Yeah.
You're not scared, are you, Dad?
Mm. Mm.
And today, it's been the biggest compliment that I've had. Because I know that Gen Z, Tim, is looking at the adults in the room, and they're learning from us how to handle the crisis of their generation when they are our age.
Yeah.
And I just hope that we understand that we're on stage and that we do it really well.
Yeah. I believe it. I believe every day is a job interview for me when I'm in front of students. Yeah. And I think you just got an A+ from your son right there.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Listen, if you've enjoyed what Tim's had to say, which I'm sure all of you have, just like we've done, Tim, the last few weeks, we want to give all of our viewers the opportunity to have a copy of your book. It's our gift to our community, and I hope to the entire Gen Z that we can be really great adults in the room. So if you're interested in having that book, you can go to teamsewell.com/leadership, fill that information out. Tim's team's going to mail a copy of that book out to you. We're just so honored to be able to put that in your hands and equip you with some really great wisdom in time that wisdom is really needed. And let me say, Tim, thank you. You're an incredible friend. So grateful to have you here. And one of our close friends next week is going to round out this stretch. And David Salyers, who's one of the retired executives from Chick-fil-A, is going to be with us next Thursday. We believe we are closing in next week on basically, Tim, what has been 40 days for us in this wilderness in West Texas. And so I am not only hopeful and not only prayerful, but believing that we will see a new day dawn next Thursday as we close out this series of the Sewell LeaderLIVE. So thank you for being such an amazing part of this. We're grateful for you.
Collin, back at you. I'm so grateful for you. Glad you're in my life. And thanks for letting me share with the people who are listening.
Yeah, thank you. For all of you, thank you. God bless. Look forward to seeing you again soon.